We need to learn every day, and I want to hear what is the opinion of the others concerning this whole topic.
I want my kids to see that their mom tried, to learn more for them. And as a woman, I hope that this conversation can build my character.
You have an ideology and you have a weapon. So my weapon as a writer is my pen. And my ideology basically is to excoriate some of these social fallacies.
If I'm a human being, I shouldn't have a problem with people wanting to stand up for their rights.
I think it just goes back to me remembering visits to Ushago or upcountry with my mom and dad. And it was always the same scenario. My dad and uncles would go slaughter the goat would go back and be cooked by the women, and then they'd have their traditional beer. They would have a good time. And my mom and aunties and sisters would be in the kitchen, basically slaving for those functions the whole time. So that's the first time I came to realize, wait a second, that was entrenched to me in my mind very early on.
I remember there were parts of the meat that was to be eaten by men.
The nice parts.
Yes.
For the men.
Yes. And others were to be eaten by girls. Then you were introduced into circumcision. After this process, you become a total man. And you should not play around with the girls. You should not entertain any nonsense from the girls. All these things, when they are inculcated in the early stages, you grow with them and they are very strong in you.
I've always been touted as somebody who hails masculinity. And I think that has a lot to do with the kind of men that I grew around. They were not perfect men, but they were men who I saw work hard for their families. They are men who I saw protect and provide for their families. I'm outspoken because I was allowed to speak. I was not put down, you're a woman, I was disciplined, and probably that is why I am who I am today, by especially my dad. And so how I see men as not monsters, and if somebody chooses to be a monster, that is on them. And these role differentiation that some see as probably slavery, like cooking and all that. But that does not mean that as a man you cannot cook or help your woman in the kitchen and everything. So I think how I was brought up has influenced why I do not, see men as monsters.
One of the things that's changed so much in me was realizing, even for me, how much privilege as a man I've lived in.
We live in a world where sexism and inequalities are so ingrained that it is normal to view another human being with a lens that essentially reduces them in our eyes.
Oh, mine goes both ways. There are things I learned when I was young that didn't take root until when I was older. And there are things I discovered when I was older. For example, when we were younger, we played kalongolongo. I don't know the English translation to that. We played house. I think that's the nearest. And because I was a boy, I became a father, a husband of the house. And I was the one chilling and watching the wooden TV. my wife was busy with the jerry cans cooking in the kitchen with mud and everything. So we were taking up gender roles from that age. They didn't stick with me because my mother did not want to know whether you're a boy or a girl. The person who follows me in line is 7 years younger than me. So for the longest time, I was the only child. There was so much violence around me. I could not really understand so much about gender roles per se, because I was more about surviving, right? And then the older I got, when I got to my teenage, now there's so much suppression within me and I want to express myself. But the people who I'm seeing who look like me, who are men, who are boys, didn't look like expression was a thing. It wasn't a thing. So I'm so confused because I'm going through so much pain, but I'm not seeing people like me talk. But now when I got older and now I start challenging my father against his violence, I'm starting to ask the questions, and then now I'm being silenced By who? The older version of somebody who looks like me. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right, because I grew up watching my aunties crying all the time. I kept wondering, don't my uncles cry too? So when I started asking these questions, I realized, oh, so the violence wasn't just in my home, it was in my village. And I'm getting older and I'm understanding, oh, so it isn't just in my village, it is in my neighborhood. So now, when I'm starting to question my father, other men are also questioning me. So for me, it was a mixture of the things that I saw, but did not necessarily believe, but I saw them.
My mom, may she rest in peace, I lost her when I was 11 years old. In my life, I have never seen any human being who cannot speak for themselves when they live in a society that creates bigger dangers. What you say about even the food, I used to hear that. My grandma was kidnapped. That's how women used to be, married. Tell you your grandfather, your great-grandfather used to chase lions 300 kilometers. Like where, how? It took me in a marriage to understand what toxic masculinity is, because my beautiful wife spent 5 years drumming it into me. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What we need to understand, the bigger dangers are inside us.
I am a sum of what I gather even from conversations such as this with people I agree with and people I don't. And so it has been a continuous process. And to say that it was anchored or created or formed in my childhood would be false, because I grew up in a home where, for example, gender roles were not fixed. I saw my mom work, I saw my dad not work, I saw my dad work, I saw my mom not work. And I think for me, my understanding of gender began when I understood that I was a girl. Whether it was first time I had my menstruation, whether it was an encounter with sexual assault, molestation, sexual harassment, or listening to lived experiences of other women, in those moments, my identity as a woman sprang up. There are things that I learned as early as 3 years ago, understanding gender identity and intersectionality, and the fact that just because I'm a woman and this woman from New York is a woman doesn't mean we are equal. True. We all have different experiences. So for me, it has been a continuous process.
It is the brutality we grew up with from older men and then with each other that separates us from our humanity.
We are different, but that does not mean that one gender is superior than the other. We can just marvel in our own uniqueness. And some of these things do not have to be gendered. They're basically human rights,
I think it is about time we began looking at gender as something that affects our entire community or affects society as a whole, and not just women or people that identify as female.